There is a trilogy of maps that exists within the Call of Duty Zombies franchise, the Of the Dead trilogy. No, I don't consider Dead of the Night to be an Of the Dead map, okay? It's my video. Well, actually, these are my videos. While I continue work on my next video essay, I thought I would compile my videos about Mob of the Dead, Shadows of Evil, and Call of the Dead into a single hour-long video so I could have something on the channel while I finish my next video essay, which hopefully shouldn't be much longer.
Right.
Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already to be notified about future uploads, including my next video essay, and click the like button as well. It helps out more than you know. So, without further ado, I present to you the Of the Dead trilogy. Mob of the Dead is undoubtedly one of the greatest Call of Duty zombie maps ever made. From map design and story to the incredible all-star cast, Mob is easily a top 10 map for most, if not all, Call of Duty Zombies fans. However, there is more to the story. You see, Mob of the Dead saved the Zombies mode from a cruel and painful death. Many fans and gamers alike had almost given up hope that zombies would ever be great, or even fun for that matter, again. When all seemed lost, a new lead developer stepped up and crafted what is widely considered one of, if not the, best and most integral zombie maps of all time. In this video, I plan to go over how Mob of the Dead opened the door for fans to the best era of Call of Duty Zombies we have ever seen to date. So join me as we explore how zombie fans had almost given up hope, and how this map saved us from tragedy. In 2010, Call of Duty Black Ops was released to critical acclaim, and it eventually became the best-selling Call of Duty game ever, selling over 32 million copies. The game went on to spawn several sequels due to the game's success, and gave us many great, and not so great, zombie maps over the next decade. But it all started with this one game. 4 DLCs would be released for this title: First Strike, Escalation, Annihilation, and Resurrection. Included in these DLCs were the zombie maps Ascension, Call of the Dead, Shangri-La, and Moon, respectively. During this era of zombies, the storyline had just begun. The lead developer had taken his creation and began to tell an enthralling tale across many maps and games, starting with Doris in Call of Duty World at War. However, it wasn't until Ascension in Black Ops' first DLC pack that we would see our very first Easter egg. Now, an Easter egg is described as an unexpected or documented feature in a piece of computer software or on a DVD, included as a joke or a bonus. This could be something as small as the developer putting their name on a mailbox somewhere in the game. However, in the Call of Duty Zombies community, an Easter egg is defined as something completely different. To zombie players, an Easter egg is essentially an objective that must be completed, but the steps are unclear. The first objective-based Easter egg was built into Ascension, and it wasn't until someone threw a Gersh device outside of the map and it sucked up some machines that it was discovered that such a quest existed. This map was the first, and the story sprawled across Black Ops' 4 DLCs, leading up to the map Moon. I won't get too into the storyline of Black Ops Zombies, but ultimately it leads to Richtofen taking control of the zombies, and the rest of the crew blowing up the Earth to sever his connection to the ether. It's complicated, but just trust me. This Easter egg is one of my favorites across all of Treyarch's games. The quest is a lot of fun, and the in-game cutscene of the Earth exploding is incredible. The issue is that Jimmy Zielinski, the lead developer of Treyarch Zombies, and lead writer of the story, left us on a huge cliffhanger. What happened to the crew? Where is Richtofen? What about Samantha, the previous person in control of the zombies? All of this and more was to be answered in the next Call of Duty title developed by Treyarch. The problem was, this wouldn't be for another year. In 2011, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 was released, and while it was an incredible game and set record-holding sales, it did not have a zombie mode, leaving zombie players craving more and more. Modern Warfare 3 did have a survival mode, and while this new mode was fairly fun, it did not suffice the hunger that zombie fans craved. However, on May 1st, 2012, the official reveal trailer for Call of Duty Black Ops 2 dropped, and the hype for zombies was back. Now, this trailer did not contain any information about zombies, but considering that Treyarch's last 2 games had zombies, and the last map that was released ended on a cliffhanger, it was assumed that zombies would be in the game. Gamers just had to wait a little bit longer. More than 4 months later, a trailer for zombies was finally released on September 26th, 2012. The trailer detailed a new, creepy bus station with a new form of transportation, and an awesome new map for Call of Duty Zombies. Or so we thought. You see, the map that was released with Black Ops 2 was Transit, and we all know the story of Transit, the map that is widely considered one of the worst zombie maps ever made. That's right, Transit lovers, this map is bad. It sucks, it's absolutely horrible. Please like the video. The problem with Transit isn't that the map as a whole is bad, it's that the map was too ambitious. It is, to this day, one of the largest zombie maps ever made, and the problem with this is that Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 hardware could not run this map at a stable frame rate. To allow for the map to even run and be playable, several roadblocks were put into place to slow down players from loading too much of the map at once and crashing the game. Fog was placed all over the map to hide the engine popping in resources and textures. Creatures known as denizens were made to spawn in this fog so the player couldn't just run ahead and cause the game to potentially crash from continually loading models and textures too quickly. On top of all of this, the bus, the form of transportation mentioned earlier, is extremely annoying. The robotic driver does not stop talking. He does not wait for you, and either drives just slow enough to let you die, or just fast enough to leave you behind. The wonder weapon is completely useless, breaking after using it for too long, and the Easter egg is boring. Overall, Transit was a complete failure. It had a lot of potential, and a lot of its shortcomings were from a lack of development time, but that's for another video. Now, Transit was not the only zombie map Black Ops 2 released with. From the enormous Transit map, developers were able to cut out sections and create smaller, basic survival maps. These maps were Bus Depot, Farm, and Town. Bus Depot was just as basic as it gets. A few wall buys, a mystery box, and your will to survive. Farm was fairly similar, except several perks could be found around the map to aid in your survival time. And Town is considered the best of these 3 survival maps, boasting a few perks, multiple mystery box locations, and a pack-a-punch machine. If you ask any zombie player who played zombies during this era, they would probably say that they spent more time playing Town than they did playing the actual big zombie map, Transit. Now, it must also be considered that these were still not the only maps that Black Ops 2 launched with. Black Ops 2 launched with what could technically be considered a 5th zombie map, Nuketown. There were, and still are, a few issues with this. For starters, this felt like a cop-out, taking a popular multiplayer map and converting it into a zombie map. There were some interesting ideas with this map, however. Perks would randomly spawn around the map like they used to with older World at War maps. The problem is they were truly random and took multiple rounds to pass before another perk would spawn. And because the perks were completely random, it was possible to not receive one of the most important perks, Juggernog, until round 20. This made playing this map extremely difficult. Another interesting idea behind the reason for converting a multiplayer map into a zombie map was to convert primarily multiplayer gamers into zombie players. However, another one of the issues with Nuketown was that it was locked behind a paywall. Players could not play Nuketown Zombies unless they purchased the Season Pass. The Season Pass would offer you all DLC to be released for the game throughout the game's lifecycle at a discounted price. But people still did not want to pay for the game and unreleased DLC all in the same transaction. If you did have the Season Pass, you would have access to Nuketown Zombies. But now the problem that players would have is deciding whether they wanted to play an underdeveloped gigantic map, one of 3 basic survival maps, or an extremely difficult zombie map repurposed from a multiplayer map. not a lot of options for zombie players, which left them wanting more, feeling disappointed, and ultimately setting zombies aside until the next map was released. On January 29, 2013, Black Ops 2's first DLC would finally release. This DLC came with the infamous zombie map, Die Rise. Everyone and their grandmother knows Die Rise. The problem is, everyone knows Die Rise as perhaps the worst zombie map ever made. This is extremely bad news for zombie players, and the zombie mode as a whole, because Transit and Die Rise, two of the worst zombie maps ever made, were released back to back. Die Rise had some interesting ideology behind it. Every zombie map before this had primarily been developed horizontally. You could go anywhere you wanted and do anything you wanted to do, as long as it was along the horizontal axis. Die Rise took that formula and instead was built to be a zombie map that is primarily played along the vertical axes. This sounds like a really cool idea. However, in execution, this map is just awful. The majority of all players who play this map don't even die to the zombies. They mostly die of fall damage, either from falling down an elevator shaft or falling off the side of the building. This problem could have been fixed with one simple perk that the lead developer of Zombies, Jimmy Zielinski, had created in the previous Black Ops game, called PhD Flopper. PhD Flopper allows the player to be resistant to explosive damage and fall damage. Lucky for players, PhD is on the map. Unlucky for players, it's outside of the playable area. If you ride the spawn elevator shaft down and freeze frame the footage you record, you can see that PhD is teased outside of the playable area, and a lot of people attribute this exact decision to the termination of Jimmy Zielinski. Jimmy would later be fired from the company after what can only be considered as contractual obligations, such as finishing his final zombie map, Buried. However, someone would take over his position, someone extremely integral to keeping the zombie mode alive. But we're getting there. The response to Die Rise seemed to be overwhelmingly negative. Don't get me wrong, YouTubers like Spiderbite from NGT Zombies were taking full advantage of the newly released map, uploading a new video every time a new step to the Easter egg was even discovered. However, it seemed like fans and content creators were quickly growing tired of this abomination of a map. The Easter egg steps to this day are unclear on how to solve and require a serious amount of guesswork. So, as fast as players hopped on board to enjoy the map, they quickly stopped playing due to the lack of enjoyment that came from the map. This was a relatively dark time for the Zombies community. Players were growing bored of the mode, and early YouTubers like Mr. T Lexify were even thinking about quitting. I'm not sure if they had stated it at the time, but years later, they've talked about it numerous times, especially Lex. Nobody is playing Die Rise, very few people are playing Transit and Nuketown, and most people are seemingly playing the basic survival maps, such as Town and Farm. However, during this dark time in the Zombies community, an individual would step up and begin to craft a zombie map. A map that would swoop in to save us Zombies players from the impending doom of Zombies being cancelled forever. I don't know if Zombies being cancelled was even on the table, to be fair, but it sounds dramatic, so we're going with it. On April 4th, 2013, the Call of Duty YouTube channel uploaded a trailer for the new DLC pack called Uprising. It would feature a couple of new multiplayer maps, one of which would be a reimagining of Firing Range from the first Black Ops game. However, at around the 2-minute and 25-second mark, the trailer would go dark, showing what seemed to be an abandoned cell block. The trailer would ultimately lead up to revealing to fans the latest zombie map for Call of Duty Black Ops 2, called Mob of the Dead. In today's age, Mob is known as one of the best zombie maps, and to some, the single best zombie map ever made. We didn't know it at the time, but by this teaser alone, we could tell that this map was going to be something special. The first person to be shown in this teaser would be none other than Jason Blundell himself, the savior I have been mentioning this entire video. Jason and the ideas he would have for the zombie mode would save the mode from what can only be known as an impending doom. See, it's not necessarily that Zombies was in dire threat of being cancelled, but more along the lines of zombie fans were growing tired of playing the same old garbage. Now, zombie fans were returning to Black Ops to get most of their zombie fix. Black Ops' final DLC was zombies only. It came with the map Moon, and all 4 World at War maps were completely remastered. Because Transit, Die Rise, and Nuketown were the only real zombie maps to play on Black Ops 2, fans just went back to Black Ops, where there were 10 zombie maps to play. That is until Jason Blundell stepped up to the plate, and took a swing for what is known as the saving grace of zombies. Jason talks about bringing the story to a new place of horror thriller. He talks about wanting to take the story to Alcatraz, the prison that is built on an island off the coast of San Francisco. This is a personal take, but Mob of the Dead is the greatest idea for a map setting I have ever seen across any zombie map that Treyarch would ever make. Taking the story and placing it in the Prohibition era, stuck on Alcatraz Island with hordes of zombies, playing as 4 mobsters locked away for crimes they had committed, and having to work together to escape, leading to the Easter egg that would be constructed for this map. Jason Blundell actually took the time to go to Alcatraz to make sure that they got the most accurate interpretation they possibly could, making it truly feel like you are playing there. Right there, in Alcatraz prison, Mob of the Dead would also bring some extremely unique gameplay features, innovating in a way that Jimmy Zielinski could not. See, Zielinski's idea of innovation was stuff like a bus that would carry you from point of interest to point of interest, or having to build a wonder weapon that could only be used once, or even building a zombie map that is played along the vertical axis instead of the horizontal axis. Zielinski was never able to really deliver on true gameplay innovation, but Blundell was. Blundell introduced a Mob of the Dead exclusive feature known as the Afterlife system. The Afterlife system completely gets rid of the classic perk Quick Revive, and instead replaces it with a system that gives you an extra down every round. This allows you to buy an extra perk you may have never been able to buy before, because every player would always buy Quick Revive. Blundell hates the idea of required perks taking up a perk slot, removing the ability to purchase another perk you may have never thought of buying before. He went a little too far with this ideology in Black Ops 4, but again, that's for another video. Mob of the Dead also features a new wonder weapon known as the Blundergat. It can be upgraded via a small quest to the Acid Gat. Both of these weapons perform quite well and can be used in various ways in attempts to reach higher rounds. But from visual appeal alone, the Blundergat and Acid Gat are some of the coolest looking wonder weapons ever put into zombies. They are based on 2 Civil War era weapons, the Blunderbuss and the Gatling gun, combining both into this insane autonomy of a weapon. I absolutely love the Blundergat and the Acid Gat. In addition to the Blundergat and Acid Gat, there is another wonder weapon that can be obtained via another quest. If you feed 3 hounds around the map, you will receive the Hell's Retriever, a tomahawk wonder weapon. Nothing like this had ever been done in zombies before. We had monkey bombs, but nothing at all like the Hell's Retriever. The Hell's Retriever is a tomahawk that, when thrown, will return to you. It can be used to kill zombies, of course, but also to retrieve power-ups. Its effectiveness can be highly utilized when training zombies, and can be thrown to a power-up further away as to not mess up the train. It can also be used to grab power-ups on the other side of hordes of zombies, killing some on the way there and the way back, and not requiring you to risk going through the horde. The Hell's Retriever is such a uniquely awesome wonder weapon that also serves a purpose outside of killing zombies, which is something that Blundell had also innovated upon. It doesn't end there. The Hell's Retriever also has an upgrade path. By using the Hell's Retriever to retrieve 5 hidden skulls around the map, it can then be upgraded into the Hell's Redeemer, which is essentially just a stronger Hell's Retriever, but the option to be able to do so is super important to the replayability and boosting quality for the map. Now let's talk about the cast of the map, because as a movie buff, I have been super excited and anxious to talk about these actors playing these characters. These characters, who have now become iconic, are easily my favorite part of the map. which is crazy for me to say because I am always about gameplay. I prefer good gameplay over good graphics, interesting mechanics over story. However, this is one of the only maps in all of COD Zombies where I prefer the characters and story over everything else, because the cast and the story are expertly crafted. The story goes that these 4 inmates, Finn O'Leary, Albert Arlington, Salvatore De Luca, and Billy Handsome, are working together to escape Alcatraz when a zombie outbreak occurs, trapping them on this island. Essentially, Albert Arlington betrayed the trust of his 3 companions, after which Finn, Sal, and Billy killed Al on the roof of the prison. The characters are stuck in a time loop, and whenever they get the chance to escape, they're locked into electric chairs and sentenced to death, the same way they were sentenced to death after having been found guilty of murdering Al. However, this is their time loop situation. They are forever doomed to repeat the murder of Al Arlington and be sentenced to death via electrocution. That is, unless Al can kill his companions first, breaking the loop. This is the story of the Easter egg, at least the gist of it. I'm sure there are some steps I'm missing or some details I got wrong, but you get the idea. The Easter egg is literally the story. If all players kill Al, the loop resets, but if the player controlling Al kills his companions, the loop is broken. It is such an incredible idea for a story, and is broken down through amazing gameplay so well by lead developer Jason Blundell. The actors Jason was able to get to play these characters absolutely is a feature of the map in itself. Ray Liotta from Goodfellas and Revolver plays Billy Handsome. Michael Madsen from Reservoir Dogs plays Finn O'Leary. Chaz Palminteri from The Usual Suspects plays Sal De Luca. And Joe Pantoliano from The Matrix and Memento plays Al Arlington. These 4 insanely famous actors make up our cast of inmate misfits, and their performances are through the roof. I could not possibly think of anyone else to play these characters. Their voices, mannerisms, and line delivery are burned into my brain. They are so good as these characters and add another level of quality to the map as a whole. Jason Blundell did something very smart for his first zombie map in the lineup of existing Call of Duty zombie maps. He decided to make an Of the Dead map. What is an Of the Dead map? An Of the Dead map is a map that doesn't consist of the usual lineup of characters that has already been established, or that is known for being the main lineup of characters. There had been a single Of the Dead map before this one, Call of the Dead. Call of the Dead strayed away from the lineup of misfits that make up the Ultimus characters. Richtofen and the gang are technically still on the map, just locked behind a door, requiring the help of these actors making a movie to escape. Call of the Dead hired a cast of incredible actors for their story as well, obtaining the skill set of actors Danny Trejo, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Robert Englund, and Michael Rooker. Call of the Dead was also in the second DLC pack for Black Ops, much like Mob of the Dead was in the second DLC pack for Black Ops 2. Jason Blundell was very smart with both choosing to make an Of the Dead map for his first Zombies map, as well as timing it for the second DLC release, and choosing his cast to play the characters he had written. Getting the likes of Ray Liotta and Joe Pantoliano alone is enough to have your story told in a very compelling way, and I believe Jason Blundell was very well aware of this. Blundell was extremely smart in the way he crafted his maps and his creations. He thought about every minute detail he possibly could, even what kind of map he wanted to make, and in what order he would like it to release in the lineup of DLCs. Mob was a savior for zombie players. After the run of maps that we had, Transit and its survival maps, Nuketown, and Die Rise, Mob released at the perfect time. Many people were thinking about quitting, not just quitting from the mode, but several content creators thought about quitting during this weird era of zombies. Nobody wanted to create content about maps like Transit, Nuketown, or Die Rise. Mr. T-Luxify specifically has stated numerous times that he had thought about quitting before the release of Mob of the Dead. Zombie fans were happy again, post the release of Mob, and Mob would actually be the first in a run of some of the best zombie maps that have ever been made. After Mob, Jimmy Zielinski released what would be his final zombie map called Buried. Buried was not just Zielinski's best map since Moon, but it was widely considered one of the best zombie maps ever made. Buried can be played very simply with a Pack-a-Punch weapon and one of the new wonder weapons, like the introduction of the Ray Gun Mark II. With this kind of setup and the easiness of Buried, high rounds can be achieved with ease. However, Buried can also be very complex, with stuff like the Time Bomb, wall buys that can be drawn wherever you'd like, and camping strategies that require skill in timing. None of this would be enough, however. Jimmy Zielinski, post the launch of Buried, would later be fired from Treyarch due to the extremely rough launch of Black Ops 2 Zombies. Jason Blundell would take over as Zombies lead developer and create another map that many consider the greatest Zombies map ever made, Origins. Origins would bring back the beloved cast of misfits from Black Ops Zombies, Richtofen, Takio, Dempsey, and Nikolai, but alternate universe versions of them. This would ultimately be one of the greatest decisions Blundell could have made, because his storytelling through Origins and the rest of Black Ops 3 is masterfully crafted. But all of this started with Mob of the Dead, a map that truly saved Call of Duty Zombies from cancellation, and brought fans a map that was fun to play, explore, and study. Blundell and his team of extremely gifted level designers, programmers, writers, character artists, sound designers, and musicians crafted a map that told an extremely compelling story, and also single-handedly saved the mode from demise. Though Blundell did not create this map alone, he did guide a team of very talented people to be able to create such a map as this. A map that is beloved by many to this day. A map that spawned many more ideas for future maps and stories. A map that would give Blundell the idea to create Origins, Shadows of Evil, Dreisendrache, Zetsubo no Shima, Gorod Krovi, Revelations, and remastered Doris into The Giant. The path that led to the idea of Black Ops 3 Zombies, the game that most people call the greatest zombie game Treyarch has ever made, came from one single map. One single idea to make a map based on a real location, hire a cast of elite A-list actors, and tell a story better than most Hollywood films. It all started with Jason Blundell and his map, Mob of the Dead. Thank you, Jason. May your future endeavors bring us stories like these once again. Shadows of Evil is one of the greatest zombie maps ever made, full stop. That is a fact, that is a law. Have a good night. But what if I told you that that wasn't always the case? Or at least that fans didn't always consider it an all-time best map? Shadows of Evil has had a very strange progression over the years, in the sense that fans' opinions of the map have kind of been all over the place. Shadows of Evil wasn't always the fan-favorite masterpiece it is considered to be today. At the launch of Black Ops 3, it seemed like a lot of players weren't giving the map the time of day, so to speak. As in, players weren't taking the time to truly explore the map, discover its secrets, understand the story, or complete the Easter egg. That's not to say that all players felt this way. In fact, many players thoroughly enjoyed the map at launch. But in this video, I want to go over the facts with you as to why Shadows of Evil was a grower, not a shower. So grab some snacks, sit back, and relax as I delve into the history of Shadows of Evil and how it eventually became a cult classic zombies map. On November 6th, 2015, Call of Duty Black Ops 3 was released to the world. Black Ops 3 now is considered an all-time Call of Duty title, as in a lot of people consider this game to be in their top 10 or even top 5 Call of Duty games. However, Black Ops 3 had a really strange launch. You see, Black Ops 3 was the first Call of Duty to have a beta release. Now betas are expected from new Call of Duty releases. It's typical for the studios to announce that a closed beta would be in effect a couple of months before the release of the game. But at this point in time, a beta for a Call of Duty title, much less a console title, was unheard of. A closed beta was made available for people who had pre-ordered the game, followed by an open beta that was then available for all players. It's also worth noting that this was the first Call of Duty game that was signed under a Sony deal. Thus, the betas were made available to PlayStation 4 players first, and then all platforms the week after. This was also in a time of quarterly DLC releases, and typically these DLCs would release up to a month early on the platform that had a deal with Activision. This was Microsoft and Xbox for many years, until Activision decided to sign a deal with Sony and the PlayStation instead. I'm very glad that we're past these days. Sure, exclusives still exist, but exclusive DLC and timed exclusive DLC just made players bitter, but that's beside the point. Black Ops 3 was also released in a post-Advanced Warfare world. Advanced Warfare, even at the time, is considered one of the worst Call of Duty games ever made because of its change in movement and addition of loot boxes. A change that would not only impact the Call of Duty franchise, but the gaming industry as a whole. Black Ops 3 was a Treyarch Studios game, and was guaranteed to have a zombie mode. So if you were like me, the first thing you did after popping in the disc was go to the Zombies mode and play the brand new zombie map. Now, Black Ops 3 had a similar infrastructure as Black Ops 2. That is to say that Black Ops 3 launched with 2 zombie maps. However, one of them was locked behind a paywall, much like Nuketown Zombies from Black Ops 2. And much like Nuketown Zombies, the paywall that the map was locked behind was the Season Pass. Regardless of my opinion about this situation, the second map that Black Ops 3 launched with was The Giant, a remaster of the World at War classic Der Riese. The Giant is a stunning map. Not only was the map running on the new Black Ops 3 engine, on an at-the-time next-gen console, making it look stunning as is, but Blundell decided to make the map based during the winter. Much more bluish and colder tones are pulled into the color scheme. Snowflakes are falling from the sky, adding to the atmosphere. Needless to say, The Giant was, and still is, an extremely good-looking map. Now, why do I bring this all up? You see, Shadows of Evil was the launch map for Black Ops 3, and The Giant was the bonus map. However, it seemed as though most people were instead playing The Giant more. Don't get me wrong, content creators like Mr. TLuxify and NoahJ456 were making videos about the map, hunting for Easter eggs and making tutorials and guides, and their videos were performing quite well. However, it still seemed like most people were playing The Giant more than Shadows of Evil. Years later, Mr. TLuxify admitted that at the launch of Black Ops 3, most of his time was spent playing The Giant. I think he said this in a live stream or a video, but when I heard this, I then asked my close friends what map they spent the most time playing, and their reply was the same. They had spent most of their time playing The Giant as well. They explained to me that Shadows of Evil was a cool map, but I just enjoyed playing The Giant more. Further digging had shown me that most of the people I knew played The Giant more, because it was better for casual fun, and that Shadows of Evil required too much setup to enjoy. Shadows of Evil brought a very different tone to Call of Duty Zombies. The zombie mode had always been about darkness, horror, and metal. Shadows of Evil stepped away from all of these themes and took a different direction. Shadows still maintains a slight theme of horror, being extremely inspired by the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. But where Shadows begins to differ is in its choice of music. Music can completely change the tone of a story you're trying to tell. In zombie maps previous, there had always been a sense of metal throughout the mode. Menu music is metal, Easter egg songs are metal, round changing music is metal, and ranking up music is metal too. Shadows decided to step into the realm of swing and jazz instead. This choice is genius. Jazz and swing music fit the map's tone so much better. It also makes sense given that Morgue City, the location where the map is based, is a take on an alternate version of New Orleans, Louisiana, and New Orleans is known as the City of Jazz. Also, the idea to base the map on an alternate version of New Orleans in the 1940s is such a cool idea. Blundell is very good at building zombie maps in a location and era that you had never thought about before, like Mob of the Dead during the Prohibition era in Alcatraz prison, or Origins in the trenches of France during World War I. The tone of Shadows is such a breath of fresh air, and stands to this day as one of the most original and unique zombie maps. Much like Blundell did with Mob of the Dead, he also brings some new, innovative features that help to set the map apart from any other and bring fresh gameplay to the mode. Around the map, there can be found these Margwa heads. What is a Margwa? We're getting there. These Margwa heads are plants that can be opened using the fumigator. The fumigator is a tool that can be found on the map that fumigates the Margwa heads, causing them to open and provide you with a gift. Many things can be found by opening the Margwa heads. A few different weapons, any one of the various power-ups, and sometimes you can even receive the ray gun wonder weapon. But what you're really looking for is the Apothicon Servant part. What is the Apothicon Servant? The Apothicon Servant is the new wonder weapon of the map. It is an alien-like creature that you literally shove your arm into and fire out what is essentially a black hole that sucks in all enemies, instantly killing them. Many consider this to be one of the most powerful wonder weapons ever put into zombies, and because it's so powerful, it does not come with a lot of reserve ammo. This makes sense, given that there needs to be a balance between being overpowered and vulnerable. But overall, the Apothicon Servant is easily one of the most powerful wonder weapons ever made. Shadows of Evil also has a buildable shield. The shield was first introduced in the map Transit, was refined in Mob of the Dead, and perfected in Origins. Shadows, however, would take the shield and innovate upon it even more. This iteration of the shield would be known as the Rocket Shield. The Rocket Shield does what the name describes it as. It has a rocket attached, allowing you to propel yourself into a horde of zombies, knocking them out of the way or killing them. The shield also has an upgrade path, allowing the shield to hit harder and kill faster. The unfortunate part about the upgraded shield is that its durability remains the same, and when the shield breaks, it's gone forever. You can theoretically upgrade another shield, but given that the shield will most likely remain on your back to protect you from attacks from behind, it would only be a waste of time to do so. The rocket shield is great, but because of its useless upgrade path, it is unfortunately the weakest part of the map. However, the fact that a shield, an optional weapon that isn't required for any part of the Easter egg and is only useful if you want it to be useful, is the weakest part of the map says a lot about the quality of the map. Shadows of Evil also introduced a utility that has since been recognized as one of the most innovative features in zombies history, yet was never introduced into the future zombie maps until Mauer der Toten in Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. I of course am talking about the Civil Protector. The Civil Protector is a robot that assists you in fighting off the hordes of the undead. He can be activated by finding 3 fuses throughout the map, one in a different district of Morgue City. Upon finding all 3 fuses, you would then need to go below Morgue City. In each district, a portal can be opened that takes you below the city to an old abandoned tram station. Here is where Pack-a-Punch can be found, but more on that later. If you place the 3 fuses into the fuse box down here, the Civil Protector can then be summoned and protect you from many enemies that can be found here in Morgue City. The Civil Protector can also revive you in solo and does not use a quick revive. We all know that you can only buy quick revive 3 times in solo, so the fact that the Civil Protector can be used to avoid wasting one of your 3 quick revives is huge. Just another incredible idea, adding to the innovation that Shadows of Evil brought to the zombie mode. Let's back up for a minute and take a look at that old abandoned tram station I was talking about earlier. In Morgue City, a tram can be used to make your way around the map. The tram is ultimately the successor to the bus from Transit. The tram doesn't really find its usefulness through traveling around the map, however, because just running around the map honestly isn't that annoying, and while the tram might get you to a different district in a slightly faster manner, you would be able to save yourself 500 points, which could be the difference between buying Juggernog or Pack-a-Punching. However, the tram does have another use. Hidden in buildings up high are 3 different symbols. These symbols are different every single time you play Shadows of Evil, and the only way to be able to see them is by taking the tram from district to district. Once you have discovered what the 3 symbols are, you will need to go down below Morgue City to the abandoned tram station and enter these symbols into the wall. This will give you an egg. The player must then take the egg to 4 different ritual locations, 1 in each district. Once the egg is placed, the player will then have to kill between 10 and 12 zombies to fill the egg with enough souls. The player will need to do this for all 4 ritual locations, and once completed, the player will then need to return the egg to its original location, and the player will then receive the second wonder weapon on the map, the Apothicon Sword. The Apothicon Sword acts as an ability weapon. It can be activated by pressing both bumper buttons on your controller. It has 2 different attacks, either a standard attack or a heavy attack, lunging the player forward and slamming the sword to the ground. As is, the sword is okay, but it can be upgraded into the Reborn Sword or the Keeper Sword. To do this, you will need to go to the district your character is associated with. If the player is Jessica, they must go to the Black Lace Burlesque in the Footlight district. If the player is Campbell, they must go to the Anvil Boxing Gym in the Waterfront district. If the player is Vincent, they must go to the Ruby Rabbit in the Canals district. And if the player is Nero, they must take the sword to Nero's Landing, just above the spawn area. Once in the player's respective location, a keeper will be there waiting for you. The keeper will give the player an egg known as the Arch Ovum. The player must then again take the Arch Ovum to 4 different ritual locations, 1 in each district. The player must place the Arch Ovum down on these ritual sites, after which a single Margot will spawn. Now, before we continue, it has come to my attention that I have failed to explain the new enemy types that can be found on the map. 3 new enemy types were introduced into Shadows of Evil. First is the Parasites. Parasites have their own dedicated round, much like Hellhounds in previous zombie maps. The Parasites fly around and attack the player by spitting acid at them, and slightly impairing the player's vision. Second is the Insanity Elementals, known by the community as the Meatballs. Meatballs can also have their own dedicated bonus round, dropping a max ammo power-up upon the completion of the round. They roll around the map and attack you by exploding upon impact. And finally is the Margwa. Margwas spawn randomly, much like Brutus in Mob of the Dead. They are very large creatures carrying 3 heads and tentacles for legs and arms. The only way to kill them is by shooting the head with an open mouth, adding a bit of challenge like a mini boss fight. If you do not have the perk Juggernog, they can kill you in a single hit, and are considered extremely dangerous. So now that we have established the new enemy types, let's hop back over to those rituals I was talking about. Upon placing down the Arch Ovum, a Margwa will spawn. The player must kill the Margwa to complete the ritual, and upon completion the player can then pick up the Arch Ovum again. Only 1 ritual can be completed per round, so the player must wait until the next round before placing the Arch Ovum down on the next ritual site. Things change after the first ritual, however. This ritual, as well as the third, will spawn 2 Margwas, increasing the challenge exponentially, and on the 4th and final ritual, will spawn 3 Margwa. Upon the completion of all 4 rituals, the player must then bring the Arch Ovum back to the location they originally received it from, depending on which character they are playing as. The player gives the Keeper the Arch Ovum and Apothicon Sword, and receives the much more improved Keeper Sword. The Keeper Sword's primary attack remains the same, but its secondary attack allows the sword to float and attack any nearby enemies by itself. Similar to the Civil Protector, not as overpowered, but accessible at any given time and for free, making the entire upgrade process worth the effort. It's an interesting idea from Jason Blundell to make the player get access to the Apothicon Sword upgrade by going to the district tied to whatever character the player is playing. This allows the map to have a lot of replayability, because every single time you play the map will be a vastly different experience. You will need to start the upgrading process from a different location each game, which could entice you to start the first ritual in a different location, which could provide you with a new way of playing the map, giving you an entirely new experience. Speaking of characters, Jason Blundell did something very interesting for the first map of Black Ops 3. He made it an Of the Dead map. If you don't know what an Of the Dead map is, we went over it in my previous essay about Mob of the Dead, but here is a quick breakdown. An Of the Dead map is a map that doesn't star the main cast of characters established as being part of the main storyline of the game. There had been 2 Of the Dead maps before Shadows of Evil, Call of the Dead and Mob of the Dead. What makes Shadows of Evil so different is that Of the Dead isn't in the map's title, which had been a standard for the Of the Dead maps previously. Instead, Blundell chose to title the map Shadows of Evil. The name fits the map perfectly. Morgue City is a dark place covered in shadows. The main villain of the map is the Shadow Man. All enemies are clearly evil, and above all, the main villain is evil, which is not expected at the beginning of the map. The Shadow Man is asking the crew to help set him free, deceiving our characters into believing that he means to do good. Ultimately, in the end, he proves himself to be nothing of the sort, so the title Shadows of Evil fits the map to a T. But given that the map is an Of the Dead map by definition, let's break down our crew and the characters who portray them. The story goes that the Shadow Man is able to bring together these 4 characters by blackmailing them, letting them know that he knows their dirty secrets. Nero Blackstone is a magician who killed his wife in a staged accident while performing a trick to claim the insurance money. Jessica Rose is a burlesque dancer who was caught having an affair and killed her lover to hide the evidence. Jack Vincent is a crooked police officer who killed all of his criminal associates to make sure that they didn't rat him out. And Floyd Campbell is a boxer who, to impress his promoter, wore brass knuckles to ensure he won his fight, killing his opponent in the process. All 4 of these characters are very interesting in their own right, but the actors portraying these characters are what truly bring these characters to life. Heather Rose from Boogie Nights and Lost in Space plays Jessica Rose. Neil McDonough from Minority Report plays Jack Vincent. Ron Perlman from Hellboy and Sons of Anarchy plays Floyd Campbell. And Jeff freaking Goldblum from Jurassic Park, The Fly, Independence Day, The Grand Budapest Hotel, Thor Ragnarok, and many more plays Nero Blackstone. This cast is stacked with heavy hitters. Jason Blundell knows how to pick an all-star cast. He also knows how to innovate properly. In the past, Pack-a-Punch has never been as easy as accessing it right off rip. In Derice, you had to activate the teleporters. In Ascension, you had to use all of the lunar landers. In Transit, you had to build the turbine, place it at the power station, run all the way over to town, use a grenade to blow open the vault, and hope that a zombie didn't destroy your turbine, but it probably did, so now we have to run all the way back to spawn to get a new turbine, run all the way over to the power station, fight out the denizens, place down a turbine again, protect it from zombies, run all the way back over the town, enter the vault, go downstairs, build the Pack-a-Punch machine. Transit is a mess. Shadows of Evil is no different, but it does require a little more from you. In every district is a location relating to each of the 4 characters. The player would need to go to each of these locations and begin a ritual. The ritual only requires that you survive a short amount of time while a human is sacrificed. After the ritual is complete, the player will receive a gateworm. Collect all 4 gateworms and place them on the 4 podiums in the abandoned tram station to begin one final ritual that again only requires you to survive a short amount of time. And once this is complete, the player finally has access to Pack-a-Punch. This is one of the most complicated Pack-a-Punch quests ever put into zombies at this point. And for someone new to zombies, or someone who prefers a more casual experience, this quest could be a little much for some players, but more on that later. Shadows of Evil also introduced a new perk, Widow's Wine. Widow's Wine has 4 different abilities. Zombies that attack the player will be frozen with spiderwebs and take damage over time, either until they die or break free. The player's grenades are replaced with sticky spiderweb grenades that deal the same effect as if the zombie were to hit the player. The player can be hit as many times as the amount of grenades the player has, up to 4. The player's knife deals extra damage and has a chance to hold a zombie with the same sticky trap, as mentioned twice before. Widow's Wine is considered to be one of the most powerful perks ever put into the game. When paired with Juggernog, the player can be hit up to 9 times before going down. Shadows of Evil has so much to offer that I could spend nearly an hour just talking about its features, capabilities, and innovations. But allow me to just talk about one last feature the map offers, and it might just be its most important. Much like Mob of the Dead's Afterlife system, Shadows of Evil introduced us to the Beast Mode system. Beast Mode works in a very similar fashion to the Afterlife system. Around the map are these ritualistic flames. If interacted with, the player will then enter Beast Mode. In Beast Mode, the player can then interact with items, portals, secrets, activate perks, open doors, and much more. To gain access to every single point of interest on the map, such as the 4 locations relating to each of the 4 characters, requires Beast Mode. To turn on perks requires Beast Mode. To open portals to Pack-a-Punch requires Beast Mode. To gain access to the eggs required for the Apothecan's Sword requires Beast Mode. Beast Mode is mandatory to gain access to most of the map, and to set up some other parts of the Easter egg, or just simple Wonder Weapon parts. What separates Beast Mode from the Afterlife system, however, is the fact that Beast Mode does not replace Quick Revive. Quick Revive stays its own perk, and Beast Mode is instead used as a way to access inaccessible areas, open doors, etc. Beast Mode is proof that Jason Blundell can take even his own creations and innovate upon them, such as he did with taking the Afterlife system and making it work the same functionally, but completely different applicably. The story, the design, the layout, the theme, the characters, the Easter egg, the music, the creatures, the innovation, and everything else about this map make it objectively almost a perfect map. Whether your personal opinions about this map are negative or positive, objectively this map is almost flawless. So how come people didn't like it at launch? As mentioned at the beginning of the video, Shadows of Evil wasn't the only map to launch with Black Ops 3. The Giant was also made available for Season Pass owners. The Giant is an incredible map because Doris is an incredible map. Releasing 2 maps at launch is a great idea. You have more than enough content to last you until next quarter when the next DLC releases. You have options, and options are always good. However, what ultimately ended up happening was players were playing the Giant far more than they were playing Shadows of Evil. Shadows of Evil was an extremely bold, complicated new idea. It introduced many new features and systems, such as alternate ammo types, Margwas, parasites, and meatballs, a new complicated way to unlock Pack-a-Punch, and many other new features that felt overwhelming to new and seasoned players alike. Shadows of Evil was and still is a complicated map. Of course, if you've played the map 5, 10, 20, 50, or 100 times, you would be well versed as to how to play the map, and where all the parts are, how to open Pack-a-Punch, and everything else the map has to offer. But imagine for a second that it's your first time playing Shadows of Evil. You have no idea where you are, what's going on, where to go, what to do, or what planet you're even on. Of course, that's the whole point, to explore and discover. But when the Giant is also available to play, an easier, simpler map that almost, if not all players are already familiar with, why wouldn't you just play that? And that is exactly what most players did. Sure, you could call it a skill issue, but that wasn't the problem. If given enough time to play and explore and learn the map, any player could get good enough to have Pack-a-Punch open in less than 10 minutes. The problem was that the Giant was made available alongside Shadows of Evil, and so most players just chose to play that map instead. The Giant is one of the best remastered maps ever made for Call of Duty Zombies, and so it launching alongside Shadows of Evil, the main new map for the game, actually hurt Shadows of Evil's success. To this day, Shadows of Evil is one of the most underrated maps ever made, and all of the blame is on the Giant. Looking back, most people can acknowledge that Shadows is a good map, a great map even, but at the time, a lot of people did not give the map the attention that it deserved. It seems like most people just found Shadows of Evil too difficult, and that's not to say that difficult maps never receive the attention they deserve because of their difficulty. Look at Mob of the Dead, Origins, or Gorod Krovi. All of these maps are not easy by any definition of the word, but all are acknowledged as being top-tier maps. Shadows of Evil can be grouped in with these maps as being difficult in its own right, but Shadows had even more weight to bear. Shadows launched on a brand new game that introduced many new features that were a little overwhelming to understand at first. The before-mentioned apps didn't have this issue, because Mob of the Dead and Origins were released as later DLCs, at a time when players already understood the game mechanics, the movement, and everything else gameplay related. Gorod Krovi also had this experience. Players had already been very familiar with the gameplay mechanics of Black Ops 3 for many months, but Shadows of Evil was the first map introducing players to Black Ops 3 Zombies, and as mentioned earlier, Shadows is not an easy map by any means. Imagine for a moment that Origins launched with Black Ops 3 instead. Origins is considered one of the most complicated maps to have ever been made, far more complicated than Shadows of Evil. If Origins had launched with Black Ops 3 alongside the Giant, I think Origins would probably be in the same situation I consider Shadows to be in. You would have this community of hardcore fans playing the map, learning it, understanding the robot cycle, and learning the staff builds and upgrades. But I believe that most of the community probably would have looked at Origins and said, "That is way too complicated for me. I'm just gonna play the Giant. Thanks." Maybe that wouldn't have been the case because it's freaking Origins, but I think that is still a valid point. Shadows of Evil suffered because the Giant launched alongside it. Now, looking back, I wouldn't have changed a thing, because launching the Giant with Shadows of Evil overall was a very wise decision. You are given the community options, which is always a positive. Two varying options that serve their purpose. One map to appease the hardcore community, and another map to appease the casual community, both of which are very important. The casual community being the folks that Treyarch and Activision want to appease the most. To me, Shadows of Evil is objectively one of the most unique and well-crafted maps ever made, but I still believe it to be quite underrated to this day. Most people talk about Der Eisendrache, Origins, and Kino der Toten. I even find that Die Rise is talked about more than Shadows of Evil, which blows my mind. The conversation about Die Rise, whether it be positive or negative, is still huge to this day, overshadowing the conversation of how absolutely underrated Shadows actually is. If you played Black Ops 3 at launch, and you recall playing Zombies, what map were you playing the most? I recall playing Black Ops 3 Zombies for the very first time. I remember starting up Shadows of Evil, being very confused and very overwhelmed. I played around a bit, died at like round 6, and switched to playing the Giant. That's not to say that everyone had the same experience as me, but some of my friends recall having very similar experiences. Years later, Shadows is regarded as one of the best maps ever made, finally receiving the recognition that it deserves. But at its birth, on November 6th, 2015, it had a rocky start. Personally, Shadows of Evil is my second favorite map of all time. However, I am very guilty of disregarding it at launch. When Der Eisendrache was released, it took the community by storm, and it was all everyone was playing. And as future DLCs released, everyone just forgot about Shadows of Evil. Then, like I say, years later, it finally received the praise it was deserving of. Shadows of Evil is objectively one of the greatest zombie maps ever made, but it still, to this day, is considered an underrated classic. And I hope that one day we will see another map with such a design, with such incredible ideas such as the Margwa mini-boss, or having to use a vehicle like the tram to discover Easter egg steps, or a cast so good as this one, considering that modern zombies have gotten rid of the cast in place of operators to sell skins. The truth is, I don't think we will ever see a zombie map as unique as Shadows of Evil ever again, and that breaks my heart. However, we do have Shadows as is. And as it is, it's a pretty dang good map. If you have never played Shadows of Evil before, or if you disregarded it as I had at launch, I encourage you to give it a shot. If you take the time to learn the map, to understand how it operates and how it plays, I hope that you will begin to feel the same way I feel about this classic, Shadows of Evil, the most unique zombie map ever made. Call of the Dead is an incredible zombie map. However, not everyone is of this opinion. From the fog and mini-boss to the atmosphere and map layout, Call of the Dead is one of those maps where you either love it or you hate it. The map has this way of gripping you by the throat, and either you like being choked or you don't. Pause. Call of the Dead is not an easy zombie map by any means, but the Easter egg isn't that bad. So why is it that this map is such a median for fans? Why is it that some people love this map, while others hate it, and it feels like there is hardly any room in the middle for those who just think the map is okay? That is what I aim to discuss in this video. To explore the map, the story, the characters, the layout, and the setting, but also to try and understand the map's dilemma. To break down the reason as to why this map is such a divide in the community. Up until the release of Call of the Dead, the zombie mode had a formula. There was a system that made Call of Duty Zombies what it is, and why it was fun. You would load into the map, earn points to buy new weapons, and try to survive to the highest round you could. There had been additions to the mode that made the gameplay loop a little more interesting, such as perks or the Pack-a-Punch machine. However, the formula very much stayed the same across all of these maps. Even when a new game launched, Black Ops, the formula remained unchanged. Get points, get better weapons, get perks, upgrade your weapons, and survive. That was the formula. Call of the Dead did not uproot this formula, nor did it completely change it. The map remains the same in terms of the gameplay loop, as any zombie map should. It's what makes the zombie mode what it is. However, Call of the Dead completely changed how this formula was executed. When attempting to climb to high rounds, typically the player would get prepared by buying all of the perks they wanted, getting the weapons they needed, and upgrading them. They then would find a location they wanted to use as a training spot and proceed to kill zombies round over round. Call of the Dead allows you to do this, but not for very long. You see, Call of the Dead was the first zombie map to introduce a proper boss. In previous zombie maps, bosses would be considered the dog rounds from World at War maps and Kino der Toten from Black Ops, or the monkey rounds from Ascension, or the Pentagon Thief from 5. However, Call of the Dead gave us a true boss zombie. This boss zombie prevents the player from staying in a location for too long because he slowly follows you around the map. And if he gets to you, he can kill you almost instantly with a single hit if you do not have the perk Juggernog equipped. The boss zombie of Call of the Dead doesn't allow you to train in a location for very long, forcing you to run around the map to find a new location. This completely changes the concept of training that had been previously well known as a strategy in the zombies community. Because of this, Call of the Dead is one of the only zombie maps where round 100 is entirely unobtainable. The reasons for this are complicated, but it essentially comes down to Call of Duty games having an in-game timer, and when this timer maxes out, the game resets. The boss zombie that follows the player around causes the game to run longer, and therefore is the reason that Call of the Dead round 100 is impossible. Now, I keep referring to this entity as just the boss zombie. He does have a name, however, George A. Romero, also known as the creator of the zombie. George invented the concept of the zombie with his 1968 film Night of the Living Dead. George Romero would go on to direct even more great films about his monster. Films such as The Crazies, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead. We don't talk about this one. And Survival of the Dead. We don't talk about this one either. George A. Romero was dubbed the grandfather of zombies, and is the reason we have Call of Duty Zombies at all. All of this is attributed to him. George unfortunately passed away in 2017 at the ripe age of 77. A custom mapper by the name of Cop for That added an Easter egg to his Call of the Dead custom map that honors George, thanking him for his creation. His creation is the reason why any of us have fond memories of past zombie maps, or why any of us have careers talking about these games at all. We can never give enough credit and praise for what he did for us, and his creation, the zombie. While we're on the topic, I wanted to talk about the cast for this map. Call of the Dead is an Of the Dead map. An Of the Dead map is a map that doesn't star the main cast of characters established as being a part of the main storyline of the game. There have been a total of 3 Of the Dead maps across all of Call of Duty Zombies games. However, Call of the Dead was the first. Technically, there have been 4, but I'm sure we'll talk about that map soon enough. This is another reason why Call of the Dead really shook up the established formula of what makes a zombie map. Richtofen, Dempsey, Takio, and Nikolai are not the playable characters on this map, which was a cool idea, and a welcomed change. It helped to keep the zombie mode fresh, and fresh is always good. The cast of Call of the Dead is incredible, And I don't just mean the actors themselves. I mean their background and the films they all have been in. Danny Trejo from such films as Spy Kids and Machete. Fun fact, director Robert Rodriguez has stated that Danny Trejo played the same character in both of these films. So that's pretty cool. Call of the Dead also stars Sarah Michelle Gellar from such projects as I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scooby-Doo, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We also have Michael Rooker from such projects as Slither, The Walking Dead, and Guardians of the Galaxy. And he even voiced Mike Harper from the Black Ops 2 campaign. Lastly, we have Robert Englund. Now, Robert Englund has acted in many films and television shows, but he is known for playing one character in particular, and is probably the reason he was hired for his role in Call of the Dead. Robert Englund played Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street. All four of these characters are the absolute perfect casting for these roles in this zombie map. The story of the zombie map is that director George A. Romero is making a zombie film in an old, abandoned Russian-German military facility, using these four actors to portray his characters. While shooting the film, real zombies began to invade the set and took off with George Romero, altering his mind into becoming one of them. The four actors play themselves, which is another really cool idea. Richtofen and the crew are on the map, locked behind a door within the lighthouse. They need the help of our four protagonists to bring them back the Vril device, which is the main quest of the map. The story of the Easter egg is quite simple, but it allows us to play as these four incredible actors, so there are no complaints from me. Moving away from the cast and the crew, I wanted to talk about one of the defining features in Call of the Dead, and how this feature functions on this map specifically: the fog. Call of the Dead has fog all around the map, a lot of fog. It rolls in as soon as the match starts, obstructing your view of pretty much the entire map. Zombie players hate fog on zombie maps. Transit is a prime example of this hatred towards fog on zombie maps. On Transit, however, the fog is permanent. It never leaves, always obstructing the view of what is directly in front of you, which is another huge problem with Transit's implementation of fog, its performance and its density. The fog never goes away on Transit. It was implemented due to the hardware limitations at the time, which is understandable, but it's also so thick. You are unable to see anything in front of you, even objects that are only a few feet away. Call of the Dead's fog is nowhere near as thick, allowing you to see quite a bit directly in front of you, and only existing as an addition to the map's tone and atmosphere. The fog on Call of the Dead is also not permanent. It rolls away for a few rounds and returns for a few rounds. It only exists to add an element of horror to the map, as well as fear for the player, thinking that the lack of visibility could cause the player to lose track of George, and end up going down. There is one other zombie map that does this also, the Darkest Shore from Call of Duty World War II. Now, I have not played this zombie map, so I do not have first-hand experience with the fog on this map. But I do know that it rolls in and rolls out, and completely obstructs any visibility you might have. From my understanding, it is far too thick, disallowing you from seeing almost anything at all. You can hardly see zombies rushing you and could cause you to go down. It's almost impossible to navigate this map in the fog unless you know the map very well. All of these things are huge problems with the implementation of the fog on this map, all of which Call of the Dead manages to avoid by having the fog not be too dense, but dense enough to add to the atmosphere, and not detract from your ability to navigate the map, kill zombies, and survive. The tone is also amazing on this map. There is a strong element of horror constantly raising the hairs on your neck, especially when you hear George out in the fog calling for you and taunting you as he slowly makes his way through the fog to find you. George is another great addition to the tone specifically. His taunts are eerie and scary. Hearing his slow, thundering footsteps out in the fog is terrifying, and finally seeing his slight blue glow causes your stomach to turn, forcing you to move elsewhere on the map, and forces you to come up with an escape strategy. George's speed is perfect in my opinion. He's not too fast that he'll catch you in a matter of moments, but rather just slow enough to cause the fear in your mind to rise. George can get much faster though. Upon shooting him or getting too close to him, he will enter into a rage state, causing him to scream and chase after you. Running for long enough will cause him to eventually give up and slow down again, or running into ice water will have the same effect. Running into ice water can be equally dangerous, but more on that in a moment. If you decide to attempt to kill George, you'll be in for a long and tedious fight. George has 250,000 health, so I'm not joking when I say it'll be an extremely long battle. However, this fight is equally rewarding. Killing George will give you a death machine power-up. This is good to bunker down and eliminate a lot of zombies quickly, at least until about round 40, when the zombies become much stronger. However, that's not the only thing George will give you. He will also drop a perk power-up, rewarding the player with a random perk. It's recommended that the player have 4 perks before deciding to do this. You'll certainly need the perks to be able to fight him comfortably, but also, the perk power-up will add to the perks you already have, allowing you to get more than 4 perks, which is the normal perk limit, and would be very useful for a map as difficult as Call of the Dead can be. Call of the Dead would also introduce a new perk into the zombie mode, a perk that would stick with the franchise into modern zombie maps. Deadshot Daiquiri. I didn't say it was a good perk. Deadshot Daiquiri costs 1500 points, but on the PC version of Call of Duty Black Ops, it only costs 1000 points, to compensate for the lack of aim assist when using a mouse and keyboard. See, Deadshot Daiquiri's only primary function is to point your weapon directly at the zombie's critical hit location, which is their head. This is done using aim assist, which is why the PC version is discounted by 500 points. But the points don't matter because the perk is practically useless on PC anyway. Deadshot does reduce weapon sway by 35%, and completely removes weapon sway while aiming down your sights, which sounds like it could be a very useful perk in multiplayer, but not zombies. Considering that zombies will usually chase after you in hordes, there is no reason to be as accurate as the perk allows you to be, because stray bullets will just hit zombies behind the ones you're shooting. The perk can be a hindrance in some situations. If you wanted to shoot the zombie's legs to create a crawler, or just to get as many points out of a zombie before fully killing it, Deadshot would hinder you from doing this smoothly. Every time you aim down your sights, you'll be brought straight to the heads of the zombies. This might cause you to retract your aim and try again, but it would only have the same effect and do the same thing again. You could then drag your sights to the zombie's legs, but this is slow, and in a mode where quickly running zombies are chasing you, this is a bad situation to be in. And on top of all of this, the perk is pretty much useless on PC. There is no aim assist on the PC ports of these games, at least when using a mouse and keyboard. And considering that the perk relies on aim assist for its primary function to work, it wouldn't work. You would have reduced weapon spread and weapon sway, but when you can be as precise as you need to be while using a mouse, there isn't a reason for either of those benefits. The perk could be quite useful when using one of Call of the Dead's wonder weapons, however, the Scavenger. The Scavenger is a bolt-action sniper rifle that fires special explosive rounds that detonate 3 seconds after being fired. The round will stick to whatever surface it was fired at, including zombies. The Scavenger's rounds will create a large explosion that deals an impressive 11,500 damage, issuing a one-hit kill against zombies for a good number of rounds. It's also an extremely useful tool for taking out George to get an additional free perk, allowing you to exceed the map's perk limit. Considering the very large damage as well as wide splash radius, PhD Flopper is heavily recommended as it will negate self-inflicted damage with the Scavenger, making the weapon more suited at close range. There is one other wonder weapon on the map, the VR-11. When a zombie is hit by one of the VR-11's beams, it will turn into a normal human. The human will be chased around by zombies, and he will scream while he is alive. He will run away from the zombies, heading towards the closest body of water and freezing himself to death. Since he attracts zombies, he may be utilized similarly to a zombie blood, but the zombies will only chase him if he is the closest person to them. If the player is closer to the zombie than the human, the zombie will chase the player instead. Nonetheless, a couple of zombies can easily be killed, and the VR11's effectiveness still maintains. However, the VR11's usefulness does not end there. When upgraded through the Pack-a-Punch machine, it will become the VR11 Lazarus. Shooting George Romero with the VR11 Lazarus while he is in a body of water will cause him to disappear into the water. If a player shoots a zombie 3 times with the VR11 Lazarus, it will cause the zombie to explode, killing any zombies around it at any round. If you're in a co-op game of zombies, the player could also shoot another player with the VR11 or the VR11 Lazarus, giving them a red-tinted screen and having zombies ignore them, letting them revive other players without interference. The VR11 Lazarus adds a temporary insta-kill to this effect. The VR11 and the VR11 Lazarus can also be used to calm George if he is in an angered state. This calming effect only lasts about 15 seconds, so the player would need to vacate the area as quickly as possible, perhaps even using one of the zip lines found around the map. There are 2 zip lines on the map, one leading from the top of the lighthouse to the stern of the ship, and one from the bow of the ship to the spawn. Both of these feel like they're placed in fairly inconvenient locations. Why would anyone need to use either of these? Well, they're not on the map for traversal necessarily. They're both used as escape routes. When at the top of the lighthouse, there is nowhere to go if you were to be overrun by zombies. If you had PhD Flopper as one of your 4 perks, you could just jump off the lighthouse to safety. But what if you didn't? This is why the zip lines are placed where they are. The lighthouse is impossible to escape from, so the zip line makes sense here. The zipline at the bow of the ship also makes sense, because there is nowhere to jump off of if you did have PhD Flopper anyway. The zipline would be your only escape. This isn't true. There is literally a flinger right there. Right there! I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote and recorded that line. Anyway, completely false information, fake news, moving on. Plus, it's fun to use, so that's a bonus. As for the Pack-a-Punch machine, there isn't a quest that needs to be completed to get access to it. It will simply spawn and despawn. There are several spawn locations around the map, and the lighthouse's light will point toward the location, guiding you to the Pack-a-Punch machine. This is such a cool mechanic, and I'd love to see something similar to it in future zombie maps. The problem is that the Pack-a-Punch machine will only spawn in water, which is also one of the map's downfalls. The water has a function. Whenever George is aggroed, you can lead him to the ice water and he will permanently calm down until he is aggroed again. However, besides this functionality, the water's only purpose is to slow you down and hinder your survival. This decision is one of the reasons why many people dislike this map, or at least why many people would not put Call of the Dead in their top 10 favorite zombie maps. I hate when zombie maps slow you down, or rather, put in roadblocks to slow you down. I am reminded of Shinonuma and the mud all around that map. The mud's purpose, and only purpose, is to slow you down and try to kill you. It's part of the reason I almost cannot stand playing that map. I am also reminded of Origins and the mud all around that map. Again, the mud's only purpose is to hinder you and to get you killed on an already difficult map. It's the exact reason why Origins is not my #1 zombie map of all time. It certainly could be. Everything about Origins I love. Absolutely everything. But the mud is incredibly annoying to maneuver through. I know some people will call it a skill issue, and you're right. If you can practice for long enough, the map can be learned, and the mud can be maneuvered through properly. But to me, all it does is prevent gamers of a more casual level from never wanting to play the map again. And that's absolutely what you do not want. But that's for another video. Call of the Dead suffers from the same problem. It does have the benefit of serving a purpose beyond hindering the player from succeeding, unlike the before-mentioned maps. But beyond the purpose of slowing down George, it serves no other purpose. Another issue I have with Call of the Dead is its Easter egg. It is very simple. It is essentially a couple of fetch quests over and over again until the Easter egg is complete. However, I cannot discredit this Easter egg too much because it was also the first single-player Easter egg ever made. Ascension and Shangri-La require 4 players minimum. I think in Black Ops, Moon required 2 players. Call of the Dead had 2 separate quests for you to complete depending on if you were playing solo or co-op, which is a really cool idea. I also cannot discredit Call of the Dead's Easter egg too much because it is a product of its time. This was the second main quest Easter egg ever put into the zombie mode, and the idea that you are playing as 4 incredible actors instead of the Ultimus crew from the previous few maps is so cool. And the idea that you are helping the Ultimus crew who are trapped behind a door is a great idea. So much of this map comes together perfectly. Sure, there are some things I don't love about Call of the Dead. The water slowing you down, the wonder weapons mostly being underwhelming, the fact that George never stops following you, and I'd rather there be no fog and snow at all. However, overall I adore this map. The tone, story, acting, level design, and the Easter egg song easily make it a top 10 map for me. I can understand why some people might not have it in their top 10, but I will never be able to understand why some people just flat out hate this map. Unfortunately, we've never seen a zombie map quite like it over 12 years later. Maybe one day we'll get to play that Zombies Chronicles 2 we were promised so long ago. I know we'll eventually get to play Zombies Chronicles 2 via the custom maps being made for the PC version, thanks to Mr. Telexify and all of the mappers, modders, and scripters he's working with. But at the end of the day, this is why I believe Call of the Dead to be an amazing zombie map.